Our next speaker is Ben Eldridge. He's also well known to probably most of us here, to the Cibolo Nature Center and Farm. He's presently the Director of Adult Education, so he knows how to talk to us as adults. He's also had a lot of experience as a rancher. His present focus is on the role of agriculture in the destruction of wildlife habitats and pollution, which has led him to search for sustainable solutions that deserve, dare I say, advocacy.
There we go. All right, look at this. It's not that fun to have to kick Rufus off. He's a huge advocate, actually. Did you guys know that Rufus helped found the Master Naturalist program? You got a lot of nodded heads. That's huge. That's advocacy. It's funny. He's up here talking about deer, but I think I'm going to talk about him. Let me try to get my presentation up. One of the things working at the Cibolo Nature Center, we obviously have a lot of different programs teaching about land stewardship or how to live a bit more sustainably, harvesting rainwater, solar energy, and all that kind of stuff. But we also, I feel like, and I also see this in Master Naturalists, there's a lot of kind of infotainment. And I think it has a role. I'm not going to diss infotainment, in terms of bringing people to care about nature and want to tell friends and neighbors something interesting about nature. So, for example, we have our Thirst for Nature program. And our Thirst for Nature program, you come and you have a cocktail. It's a way to kind of bait mom and dad out in the evening and bring the kids out to, say, learn about owls from Craig Hensley. So they go on an owl prowl and all that kind of stuff. So we're getting people to appreciate nature. However, one of the things that I do feel is lacking overall is really this push for advocacy, is really getting people out to really speak for nature. It's so easy to come to a presentation like this or another one maybe given at a Master Naturalist chapter meeting and be like, that was just the most satisfying presentation, and I'm going to sleep well tonight and I'm going to think about it tomorrow, and I can't wait for the next presentation. That's that whole infotainment model, and I really think that we need to start thinking about how we can get beyond just infotainment and start getting into proactive defense of nature. I titled my talk Free to Speak, many avenues for advocacy. Look, sometimes you're going to have to take your Master Naturalist name tag off and just say what the heck you're thinking. Form a group, write an editorial, whatever. You don't, just because you have a Master Naturalist tag doesn't mean you can't speak at certain times when it's forbidden as a Master Naturalist to speak as a Master Naturalist. You're a human being. Come on, you live in America. Let's talk. Let's chat it up. Let's make some change. This isn't working, so I'll do that. So here's the thing. You're obviously a Master Naturalist because you care about nature. You're more informed than most people. And so that's why I want to really encourage you that it's okay to have some fire in your belly and to speak out for nature, to find something to advocate for, and to get really heavily into advocating for it. And frankly, you can have more than one passion, of course, and there are clever ways to combine passions, which I'll show you. But just come on, you can't just sit there and go, golly, I like birds and I do bird walks and I contribute to citizen science. But if you're not out there advocating for conservation of bird habitat, then you're kind of just consuming, right? You're just kind of consuming nature. You're not really feeding it. You're not really supporting it and benefiting it. So, I borrowed from Richard Halbrin here, who said it's okay to have fire in your belly and get out and advocate. And I have this cool illustration that for me puts fire in my belly, because that is not that's not a prescribed burn right there, right? We are in an age in which the earth is being plowed up, cut down, torched, eroded away, habitats are being lost on a global scale, and it's often fed by consumption that you and I do. Things we buy at the grocery store is oftentimes a factor. And by the way, I'm going to do just a little bit of my personal advocacy. You heard in the introduction, agriculture is a thing for me. I want to make it a thing for you guys too. So that's a little bit of my talk, but don't worry, I'll get beyond that to advocacy in general. But look at that. I mean, that's when we complain about development in the hill country, that's kind of the concern we have. It's just this sort of let's plow down everything, and they're not really showing what they replace it with, but it's not much prettier than that usually. Oh, and furthermore, let me say this. This is the front line. Okay, actually, I would say the front line is back here because we can reverse a lot of what we see going on. So I want you guys, if you're not right here stopping things from happening, I want you even further in the black. I want you guys pushing and saying this is not okay. We got to make some change to the way we do things, how we develop our planet, and how we reutilize our resource. Because right now we are in the Anthropocene. We are the biggest factor in changes on the planet's surface. Whether that's changing, I was actually in China, gosh, back in 1996, and they were removing whole mountain ranges, basically. I mean, they were more hills in terms of size, but they were literally removing them, straight out, flattening them down, so then they could put in a whole bunch of manufacturing facilities. I mean, they're building a whole city by removing the hills out of that whole region. It was in the south part of China, just across from Macau, not too far from where Hong Kong is. Obviously, well, let me go to this next slide. I talk about agriculture. This is a map of where agriculture is done most on the planet. Actually, this is from 2003. I recently looked at a map of the Amazon rainforest, and it is in far worse shape now than what you see right there. It's because what we're doing is we're in the Midwest right now of the United States. We're plowing under prairie in cases where we already have it plowed under. Now we're treating it with monoculture crops, genetically modified crops that are resistant to herbicide, and then we're coating those crops with herbicides and pesticides. And simultaneously, usually we're creating a lot of bare ground, so the soil is eroding. It's washing away. So this is what we usually see. We get up to 30,000 feet, we look out the window. This is maybe 20,000 feet, but whatever, you get the point. You look out the window from an airplane and you see this patchwork of greens and yellows, and you say, golly, look, those are plants. That's nature, it's okay. These guys are hard working out there. That is not nature, those are monocultures. That is not habitat for wildlife. You're not going to find a great diversity of songbirds out there. You're not going to find a great diversity of birds, of butterflies, bees, anything like that, because it's monocultures, and oftentimes it's sprayed with all kinds of chemicals. And of course, that's not salad dressing that they're spraying on there, right? Coating, feeding these plants, essentially, these chemicals. And no, you can't wash this off the plants, all right? Whether you have neonicotinoid pesticides, they're actually usually coated onto the seed, and so it feeds into the plant tissue. But even what's sprayed onto the plant ends up in the plant tissue. So you can't just go and wash this stuff off. So I think if you're thinking about your own health, you can think about it that way. But if we're thinking about wildlife, do you see any habitat in that picture? I mean, monoculture, the habitat might be up there on the hills because it's not arable land. I don't see any habitat, really. And the reason most of us love the monarch butterfly. It's iconic. It's our state insect, right? We are so thrilled. I was just looking at Facebook today, and people are reporting the monarchs are coming back through Texas. Well, I'm worried that we're not going to have any monarchs left for my daughter. And it's not so much because of the land stewardship and the things we're doing down here in Texas, although there's some little effects. It's mostly because of the way we're growing our food. This, by the way, this chart, it shows that red trend line going up. That's the use of herbicide-tolerant crops starting around 1995. Started with soybeans. About around 1999 to 2000, they started shifting to corn. All right, again, these are plants that are herbicide-resistant, so they just keep coating them with this herbicide. And what happens is that the milkweed and the other pollen-producing plants that used to grow in the hedgerows or amidst the soybean fields, they're no longer able to grow there. So there's no habitat even within the agriculture anymore. It's called clean cropping, all right? And then, of course, we also have bad grazing management. And so, and as you can see, that's desertification happening because of bad grazing management. And we have a major problem worldwide with desertification. What happens is they crop down all of the grasses, you leave the bare ground, you no longer have a lot of roots to hold soil in place, you're not protecting the soil from the splashes of hard rain because they don't have this nice canopy cover to absorb the impact of rainfall. The water can't seep deep into the soils because there aren't deep-rooted plants anymore. As you eat the top part of the plant, the roots shrink up. You know, when you're at that point, you have very little roots. You might as well be just like San Augustine or Bermuda grass lawn. And then subsequently, water sheets off the land, it takes away the soil, it takes away the fertility, washes it into our stream, and heads off to our estuaries, and I'll show you a picture there. And then this is supposed to be a riparian area. Does that look like a riparian zone to you? A stream side that's supposed to be lush with vegetation that helps slow down the flow of water? No, it's starting. It's starting to erode all over the place. The animals are hammering it. They're eating everything down, and subsequently, that habitat's gone. That's agriculture, guys. That's bad. It's bad grazing management. I'm not saying that there aren't agricultural methods that can fix this, because there certainly are. But this is bad agriculture, and it's more the norm than the exception by far. And it's happening worldwide. You saw that map. All that colored space was either grazing land or cropland. And let me add one more thing. Most of these cattle are then shifted off to, well, maybe not that. That might be India. Who knows what they're doing there? But most of these cattle are probably going to be shipped off to some sort of feedlot where they're going to be fed GMO corn and soy. So in order to feed our appetite for cheap beef that's all marbled and grain finished and all that stuff, we are depleting the planet's resources. We are literally mowing down the Amazon rainforest. We are tilling up our grasslands. And at the same time, because there isn't the incentive to raise grass-fed beef, we have people that see themselves as cattle ranchers instead of as vegetation or grass farmers. So for example, Dusty Bruns, who wins all the awards, he has a ranch nearby here, he considers himself basically a grass rancher. His job is to grow as much grass as he can on his property, and the cattle are the tool to do it. And it's about flipping the paradigm. It's about thinking differently about it that helps us shift to a better management practices. Because right now, these guys can be lazy because they know those animals are going to go get fattened up and finished off at a feedlot before they go to market. They don't have to get fat on grass, muscled out or whatever. And then, of course, the Mississippi Watershed is the largest watershed in the world. And this is the hypoxic zone down right off of the Mississippi River Delta, south of what you can see. There's Texas over there, and there's Louisiana, and obviously this is coming out of just south of New Orleans and all that. This is a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. This is where fish go, and they're supposed to consume some of that dissolved oxygen to stay alive. They have gills, just like we have lungs, to absorb oxygen and keep them moving. They go on into there, and suddenly they start feeling tired, and then they're no longer alive. And it's because all the dissolved oxygen's out of the water. And the reason the dissolved oxygen's out of the water is because all of the nutrients that flush out of the Mississippi watershed, most of it from agriculture, resulting in, a whole issue with plankton and everything, but algae. A whole bunch of different issues that basically create this dead zone. And that dead zone was was one of the largest this year that they've ever seen. In other words, this is actually an old picture from 2014. This year was actually, I think, on a par, if not larger, with 2014. All that's agriculture. So now that's kind of my advocacy to you. And the final thing is this. We can change this. We can start buying organic food, so we're not buying pesticide and herbicide-laden food. We can eat grass-fed beef and at the same time, maybe eat a little bit less meat. We will benefit personally. There's a lot of science that shows that less meat in your diet is actually better for you. And certainly with organic foods, we're putting more of a priority on the quality of the food that's grown, the care that goes into it, and usually, not always, but usually we're encouraging a more holistic approach to how food is grown. But finally, with grass-fed beef, we're not going to be encouraging people to remove the Amazon rainforest just to grow soybeans. That's just ridiculous. I want you guys to have the fire in your belly that I have right now, by the way. That's why I'm just lecturing it at you. Now, see, the thing is, first of all, when it comes to advocacy, everyone has a circle of influence. Now, a lot of times we tend to get insular, right? We tend to talk to the people that we feel most comfortable talking to about things. But I have this thing. So I'm sort of vegetarian, right? So going back to that last slide, I'm sort of vegetarian. I will eat meat occasionally, but I will tell people, because I rarely eat meat, I say, I'm a vegetarian. And people are like, oh man, that must be so hard in Texas. Or, God, I could never give up meat. That's the most common thing. And I say, well, here's the thing. Actually, I will eat meat occasionally, as long as it's free range, organic, grass-fed organic, or if it's wild harvested, go out and shoot some of the deer Rufus wants you to kill. Maybe not the ones that come out of those neighborhoods that are scraggly disease. But basically, so that's how I broaden my circle of influence, because I can mention that when I'm off at a conference. I can find myself at the Dodging Duck just hanging out, having a beer and something to eat, and somebody comes over and is talking to me. And I, or when or even just frankly telling I've even talked to restaurants and said, you guys need to have more stuff for vegetarians. They get more stuff for vegetarian. They realize there's a need for that. They start to add more stuff, and it gives more people options to get away from meat. But everyone has a circle of influence. You can talk to your friends, your neighbors, your churchgoers, your homeowners association. You've got circles of influence, and I know most of them in this case are probably like master naturalists or leaning this way. But engage those who aren't, and start talking about whatever issue you pick at the end of this discussion or this presentation that you're going to get invested in. Now, education is advocacy. Okay, I was sort of dumping on infotainment, but there is a role for it. I pictured some people that are probably familiar to you, Kathy Downs and Kip Hart, of course, over there on the left. Oh, and help me, I'm blanking on Susan Bogle. They were talking about monarchs and the monarch issues, the monarch declines and all that stuff before it became an agenda item for President Obama, before Monsanto started pumping a little bit of money into it to try to cover their tracks. They brought it to our attention. They were taking time out of their lives, or for that matter, investing the time in their lives to make the world better. Okay, they were getting out there. Kathy Downs has been crisscrossing the state. She's actually going to retire, by the way, in April of next year, 2018. She's not going to keep doing all of this outreach. We'll see her around here because she's close by. She'll still do a little bit, but she's actually going to retire. That's going to leave this big gulf, okay? Now, there's so many people who've taken this workshop. Who in here has taken her workshop? Right. You've got a lot of information you can pull from. She will give you the presentation. You can go out and give this presentation yourself. You can advocate for the Monarch Butterfly. That's an option to you. She's not special. She didn't go and take the Monarch class, in university and get a master's degree in monarchs. She just cared and got out there and did it. She and Kip actually ended up training a lot of the Parks and Wildlife staff about monarchs. They developed an expertise before it was sexy. All right, over here, Tom and Patsy England. They got into birding. Then they started to give workshops. And actually, I was recently at a meeting. Richard Halbrand's in the room, which is great. I was at a meeting with him and some other folks, and we were talking about the issue with feral cats. That feral cats are decimating our wildlife populations. I'm seeing the heads nodding out here. But it's one thing to say, I know about that. I'm a master naturalist, I know about that. It's another thing to actually say, hey, people, feral cats are a problem. You need to keep your cat inside. Sorry, that's uncomfortable, but that's the reality. It's important that we have these uncomfortable conversations. Make them comfortable. To Craig Child's point, make them as comfortable as you can, but at the same time, have the conversation. Advocate. Learn about these things and advocate. That's a new topic that I think people are going to start to have to start messaging to, and it's going to be controversial. So it's going to take some people that have some real guts to get in there and make those arguments. But they're also advocating for shade-grown coffee, agriculture, shade-grown coffee. Let's not clear out rainforests so we can grow coffee. We can grow it in the shade structure underneath the rainforest canopy. And they're advocating for that in their workshops. They're not just sort of saying, here's how you identify a bird. They're also saying, think about what you're drinking every single morning, every cup you have. Craig was instrumental in putting this together. This is the workshop for today. This is advocacy. Not just because it's about me showing up and saying advocate, it's his advocacy, making the effort. I know a lot of you guys in this room have actually done workshops. Anna Adams is back there. She's going to be involved in a workshop soon. I see so many people who do that, so I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it is advocacy, and it is super valuable because it keeps the discussion going, it ups the energy on a topic, it gets people informed. Letters to the editor and articles in the newspaper. So it's funny, people are always almost shy to write things and submit them. Not everybody, but a lot of people are. When I write anything, before I submit it, I run it through a number of people's eyes. I want to have more eyes on it and more feedback on how I could craft it just a little bit better. And did I get my facts right and all that stuff? That way I'm not so shy because I feel like, hey, it's already been vetted. It's been vetted by people who are knowledgeable. It's been vetted by people who have a sense of how to work things. And the other thing, too, about writing articles, newspapers are hungry for content. They want your content so they can sell advertisement around it. All right? So if you can write a really good, pretty decent article, and frankly, you can even probably negotiate, hey, I'd like to write one a month for you guys. they will usually put it in because, again, they want to sell advertisements for the local car dealership next to your article. That's the content that pulls readers in. Then they see the advertisement. So don't, I often tell people, come on, just write an article or send a letter to the editor about that. I like this one. This one actually shows, this is about 17 Hurf. You guys, anybody here hear about 17 Hurf? Yeah, that whole, I'll get into that in a minute. But actually, this person has decided to take their energy. Bitsy Pratt has decided to say, to defend the Cibolo Nature Center in this editorial. She's advocating for the Cibolo Nature Center's well-being and respect in the community because the 17 Hurf thing, even though the Cibolo Nature Center played, I think, a pretty respectful role in advocating for its wants and needs, the developer community and the business community was very angry with it. And of course, they're the most vocal in the community. So Bitsy Pratt says, you know what? This place is bringing value. People are moving to this town and buying your houses because this place is here. They're the ones who are making Boerne a better place. She's sticking her neck out, making the case, and I thank her for that. Advocacy. We have two authors in the room that I want to point out. I had a feeling Jim would be here, and I knew Rufus was going to be here. Jim Stanley wrote a book on managing land in the hill country. He's trying to make sure that people know how to care for their land so that their soil isn't eroding away, so that they have great wildlife habitat. And that's advocacy, man. That's some work to write a book. And then I can tell you, Jan Reed and Rufus Stevens, they worked how many years on this? Like 5-6 years to make this book happen. Is that right? 10. I started at the Nature Center, and they were having 7 years ago, and they were having meetings about it. And they had meetings up to a year and a half ago, or actually probably not a year ago, to get this book out. It is super researched. It is a very effectively written book, in my opinion. But that's advocacy. And he didn't do it because he's Parks and Wildlife, and that makes him special. He did it because he saw a need, and she saw a need to let people share some of this information so that they know how to be better stewards of their landscape. It's funny. I was at an event recently, a Hill Country Alliance event, which is this whole group of leaders in the hill country. And somebody said to me, well, of course you guys were able to do that. You're the Cibolo Nature Center. And I spoke that back to Carolyn Evans, my executive director, and we were laughing about it because we will encounter a challenge, and we're just like you guys sometimes. We're like, we have no clues. We have a sense of some connections we could maybe pull into, but this is a new topic for us. What we do is we get together, we come up with some sort of strategy, we come up with how we're going to message things and what we're not going to do, and then we act. And regardless of a logo, sometimes our actions are actually trying to hide the logo. All right, we're just trying not to be out in front of the issue, but we want to see a certain outcome. We're just some concerned citizens who happen to work for this organization, but we get strategic and we believe we can make a change, and so we take action. That's all it is. We believe we can make a change, and so we take action. So I was like, sorry, friend, that's not an excuse. It's not because we're the Cibolo Nature Center. It's because we're just some people who put our minds to things and try to make change happen. You can do that too. If you're not getting that message yet, keep listening. Cibolo Nature Center itself was founded by a group of friends who saw a neglected park. Okay, the city park that the Nature Center is on, it was being used as a dump. There were tires out in the prairie. There was all sorts of different washing machines and other junk that was being dumped out there. People were going down by the creek to change their oil right next to the creek. And I even gave a talk where I mentioned that, and somebody said, "Oh yeah, when I was a kid, they used to do," or not even when I was a kid, maybe in the 1980s they were doing that. And I remember it was normal just to take your oil and sling it into the creek, right? So there was a sort of the consciousness was not very high. The Nature Center, just a group of friends, and it wasn't the Nature Center. They didn't have a name, they didn't even have funding. Decided to get together and start cleaning up that park. Eventually they said, hey, we probably should, try to get a little bit of grant funding, so they formed up with Friends of the Cibolo Wilderness and managed to get about $10,000 the first year, just a grant to, I think, restore the prairie marsh next to the prairie. The next year, I think they got about $30,000 to add education programs. The year after that, they had enough to actually pay staff. I think a little bit. It just was totally grassroots. It's just because people said, I care and I'm going to advocate for this thing. I'm going to reach out. They made a deal with the city. They said, we want to adopt the land and be the caretakers of it. Now we have the awesome Cibolo Nature Center. And again, it wasn't that these people said, I've grown up to run a nature center. Carolyn didn't know what the heck she was doing, and Brent didn't know what the heck he was doing. They just decided it matters, it needs to be done, and I'm going to do it. Anybody can do that. Cibolo Conservancy was spawned from that. They're now pushing almost up to about 20,000 acres of conserved land. It's a sister organization of the Nature Center. Land conservation is, you're going to hear probably more about that from Jaime, of course, so I'm going to defer to him on that. But this was also really just a group of people saying, and I think it was Art Wilson came in and said, we need to do this. It's just a sort of a Nature Center member. And what do you know? They've created a conservancy. Now they've conserved 20,000 acres in the conservation easements. It's just people deciding to try and do it and doing it, advocating. John Kite, anybody know him or know of him? Yeah, hands are going up. He is a retired civil engineer and was living up on a hilltop and realized it was cheaper to harvest rainwater than it was to put in a well. Because he was an engineer, he started playing with all kinds of different ways to engineer his rainwater harvest system. And now not only is he a huge advocate for harvesting rainwater, he gives workshops. He gave one for me last weekend. But he's also protecting landowner rights or homeowner rights to actually install their own rainwater harvest systems. Because right now the plumbers want to get in there and say only plumbers can do this, and therefore you have to pay a plumber a high dollar to do these installations. And a lot of times they don't even know what the heck they're doing. So he's making sure that we can do that ourselves. Except for where we connect to the house, or if we're connected to the city water systems or the municipal water systems, that we have a backflow preventer. Not a big cost as far as dealing with a plumber if that's all you're having to install. But furthermore, he's also working on a certification system so that people don't have to be plumbers, but they can be certified rainwater harvest system installers. He's not doing this because he's special. He's doing this because he sees a need, and he decided to get out there and take action on it. This guy right here, he's a guy named Brad Lancaster. He's from Tucson, Arizona. He and his brother had this kind of rundown house that they had bought together and were living in. And every time it would rain out in Tucson, the water would flood right underneath the house and all through their property. And it was driving them crazy. So what they started doing is they started rerouting the water, but not channeling it and running it off the water, but they decided to create these little ponds and start catching the water and put in these swale systems and things. Well, pretty soon they realized, well, wait a minute, a lot of this water is coming from above us in the watershed off of these other streets. So they started going in and just putting in what are called, curb cuts, literally cutting out the curb and then digging out a little section to capture water. So they create these little pools of water. And they realized, okay, you can plant some of these trees in those pools of water, and suddenly they're starting to green up the habitat in their neighborhood. Well, the city of Tucson said, hey, you can't do that. And they said, well, let's explain this to you. So they approached city council, and they had a little tussle back and forth, but eventually they won the city council over. And now the city of Tucson is mandating that new developments include these kinds of installations that will capture water. It's called green infrastructure, low-impact development. In Brad Lancaster's case, I think he calls it planting rain. He's just some guy who just started doing this stuff, and now he's got this sweet TED Talk. It's a really great TED Talk worth watching. And he's just doing it. He became an activist by accident. And that's the thing. Oftentimes these people are reluctant heroes. And that brings me to civic engagement, because both John Kite and Brad Lancaster turned into people who had to get involved in civic engagement to justify what they're doing, to protect what they were doing, and to make it possible for other people to do it and reap the benefits. And I think that's a thing that most of us get nervous about. And I'm here to tell you, don't, because it's really fun. It gets fire in your belly. You fall asleep thinking about it, and you wake up thinking about it once you're in it. And I'm telling you, you can also make some really impactful change. And I will give you examples. And by the way, how am I doing on time? I only have a clue. I got 10 minutes, okay, or ish. So there's a saying: if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And it's true. It's true. We see it all the time in legislation. If there's been some studies that show that, as much as we vote for one side or the other, what often carries the day are the lobbyists, right? Because they're actually the people that are at the table. They're being funded to be there, and they're also oftentimes funding and paying for nice meals and things like that. And so therefore we're on the menu because we're either not at Washington, we're not in Austin, and most of the time actually so much can happen at a local level, and we're not even at city council. Go to most city council chambers, they're vacant, they're empty. There's usually a few people concerned about one issue, but then they're going to melt away as soon as that issue's done. But actually oftentimes they're just developers who are advocating, or landowners who want to develop, who are advocating their position. That's usually what's there. Planning and zoning, city council. If you ever go to a groundwater conservation district meeting, you're going to be one person in a totally empty room except for the commissioners, and they will be thrilled to see you there. City councilmen get nervous when you show up. Some of them do. And the reason I bring that, I mean, come on, cities are expanding like crazy. Most of the rural population is condensing into cities, and so we're seeing all this kind of sprawl. This sprawl, so much of our development is just like conventional agriculture, like I talked about, this sort of approach to agriculture that, you got to just plow everything down, you got to clean crop it, any negative effects to nature are externalities, are not really that our concern. And so much of our building process has actually been driven by engineers who haven't thought about nature at all. And there is so much we can do to protect and encourage more nature in our communities, but also make our development more intelligent. So, something's happening, nothing's happening, something's happening, nothing's happening. Oh, really? All right, let me get my computer. Oh, I got it. Well, no, let me get my computer, it's already off. Keep your, I think you get it to work. No, during this 2-minute break, I want you guys to think about advocating what you're advocating. Keep the immersion up for better batteries.
I'm going to start a GoFundMe account to get my computer fixed. Engine and battery.
There it is. You're up.
Oh, am I?
Yeah. Computer go. We're cool.
All right. Oh, but I already pulled out my jump drive. I screwed this up. I don't know if it's okay to say screwed. It's just my vernacular. Sorry.
We'll bleep that out of the video.
Is that right? Thank you. Delete this whole section. In fact, now it's what I really want to say, okay? I'm just going to close out and jump back in. Oh. All right, there we go. So going back to that previous slide, we saw the hellscape, right? And then there's these different approaches that we can take. So conventional development's on the left. Okay, this is more kind of at a county level because we need to obviously buffer our cities with some natural open space. But oftentimes, if you go out in the county, they say, okay, there's 1 well to 5 acres or 6 point, almost 6, 5 point, whatever, 6 acres. And so you end up with all these sort of spread out things where you have these rural estates that maybe they're supplied by city water or they're part of a municipal utility district, a MUD. And so what happens is they just cover the landscape. What happens is around every single one of those houses, you have basically this sort of patchwork of different management practices. So the landscape is not really a cohesive landscape. It's sort of this weird motley crew of Bermuda grass here and a guy who fortunately neglects his little prairie and treats it well. There might be some great warbler habitat for all I know, and some guy decides, well, I don't want those ash junipers, I've heard they're bad, and they cut them all down. You get this weird mosaic of different types of management. Whereas there's what's called conservation development. And we really need to be doing this here. What's happening is instead of spreading out all over the place, everybody decides they're going to own this land in common. And basically, like the HOA essentially helps manage that land as a common asset. People can walk through all the trails all through here. It makes for a better quality of life, but it's also keeping the habitats all intact. You're not going to have that weird patchwork of different habitat management. You have some cohesive habitat management. And it's a smarter approach to development, and frankly, we should all be clamoring for this right now in the Hill Country, given the wave of growth that's hitting us. The next thing is low impact development. So on the left-hand side, I have conventional development, and that's like, if you go over to Walmart right now or H-E-B, that's pretty much what it's like. all the water lands, it goes into these little pipes, and it runs away off to a creek. It often takes a lot of trash. I mean, it will go through a detention pond fine, but it can run off all kinds of different chemical pollutants and trash, and it shoves it usually straight to the closest creek. And literally, we're using our creeks as our drainage. How do I want to say this? As our what's the word I'm looking for? Cesspool. Yeah. No, but as part of our city's drainage system. And of course, I mean, on the one hand, that's right, but we're actually treating it more like sewers. Okay, more like drainage sewer systems from the city, rather than like creeks, natural areas, places to be enjoyed and appreciated. They're just utilized, consumed. Usually what happens over time is they become totally blown out, the riparian areas become eroded away, and it's just not the best practice. So recently people have started to promote low impact development, which you can see right up here. That's a bioswale. Capturing water, filtering it through natural vegetation. Eventually these grasses will grow up, they'll have deep roots that will really penetrate any clay and will help all that water migrate into the ground. And additionally, we have a new green space. Okay, thank you. I'm going to hurry. We have a new green space to work with that can be habitat for nature. And what we're trying to do is restore the natural hydrology of the land. So here's the common path to civic engagement. Something happens that offends someone or a group of citizens. The citizens contact government representatives and run into resistance. Those people make noise in the community, and they start to gather information, and they call everybody that they can to find out how the heck can we stop this development or make the development so it doesn't pollute the lake or so it doesn't destroy the stream, as an example. And they either find an angle that they can use to achieve their goals, or they vote the bastards out. In the city of Fair Oaks Ranch, that's what happened. They voted the bastards out. I know, I'm not saying that they were really bastards. They might be decent people in some ways, but they were not representing the citizens. And so they literally got rid of them. They changed the city council, they changed the mayor, they even, I think, changed the city planner. And now the citizens are super engaged, and they are owning that city because they own the city, and they realized it, and now they're really acting like owners. Shareholders, owners, whatever. And then now that they know the game, some stay involved until they're tired out, okay? Until they tire out. So that's the common approach that most people take to get involved in advocacy. And the thing is, we need more people to stay engaged and not be dismayed when they get a no. That's the other thing. So many people, I didn't get it and win it, and this just, it's all over with before it even starts. I'm not doing anything. No. Buck up. Come on, you can win some things. So we have this 17 HERF development. This was going to be a major, highest density development in Boerne, right next to the Civil and Nature Center, which is across the creek, and then right next to the HERF farm, which is along that straight border right there. And of course, the Nature Center wasn't too happy about that. We didn't want to have big towering buildings, but we also didn't want to have all the nasty runoff. So while the Nature Center decided to engage the developers and come up with a compromise solution for a lot of political reasons, they had to be cautious. A citizen named Emily Youre, who's actually a Native Plant Society member, got pissed off. She said, you know, what the heck? This is ridiculous, right next to our nature center. So she helped form a group called Inspire Boerne and started advocating. She put out a petition. She started advocating big time to protect the Cibolo from having massive development right next to it. Part of the whole thing was that they were pushing for, both the Nature Center and Inspire Boerne were pushing for low impact development, that water treatment plan, you know, the capturing stormwater using green infrastructure. And this is from the paper from October 3rd, City discusses low impact development. They're moving on low impact development. They're working on making a real ordinance with real teeth. We'll probably be one of the first large municipalities in all of Texas, relatively large cities, that will have a low impact development ordinance that has teeth, not just little incentives, but real teeth. And it could create a pattern that could ripple across the whole hill country, where we have the best stormwater management possibly in the country. And it's because Emily Youre got pissed, and because the Cibolo Nature Center said, hey, if we're going to deal with this development, let's also promote low impact development. And that chorus got it in people's faces. And made it overnight. People were discussing low impact development, terms they had never heard before. This is a new one that's come up. These people in the Lake Country HOA, they're all concerned about the water quality coming off of a KB home development the water would flow into Boerne Lake, and so they're getting all active about it. And Inspire Boerne decided to stay active, and they're pushing for it. Furthermore, Inspire Boerne decided to to influence the Boerne Master Plan, which is being renewed. So they said, yeah, we now understand the system. We understand who all the players are, and we understand what's going on. And let's not stop at just like one issue. Let's go ahead and try to frame the situation in Boerne so it's beneficial for the long haul. So that's just creating a group. Take off your darn Master Naturalist name tag, create another group, and go for it. It's doable. So grab a seat at the table. Planning and Zoning, City Council, County Commissioners Court, Groundwater Conservation District. You will be amazed at how few people are really turning up, but also that you can learn what the heck's going on and have a voice in the room once you know the players and know how the system works. Sometimes you're going to have to reach a little higher. You're going to have to go state or federal. So I have this faux letter here. Dear Senator so-and-so, I voted for you and I agree with you about most things. However, you are not doing enough to preserve and protect our natural heritage. Remember, the air that you are breathing was exhaled by a plant. I ask you to please stop representing the greedy exploiters who pay for your fancy dinners and instead protect our tree ordinance so that you and I can breathe. All right, I'm being facetious in that letter. Obviously, I think you can be sincere and firm, but maybe not quite so condescending. But at the same time, I've done certain letter things and I've seen some instant responses. There are certain cases that I think are easy sells. It's just somebody has to make it. And the way I do it is I write my senator, my congressional representative, I'm talking at the state level, the governor, the lieutenant governor, and maybe some part of the TxDOT or something. And I let them know I'm talking to all of them, and there's a major issue, and someone's going to die if they don't fix this curb. That kind of thing. And I've seen the response. They don't really necessarily send me a letter saying, we heard you and we agree with what you said and we've changed it. It's just 3 weeks later, all of a sudden the problem's fixed. So it can work. So I say pick something. Green development. There's so many ways to do green development. I gave you the Inspire Boerne list. That's actually got some good stuff for the cities. Agriculture and land stewardship. You can learn about restoration agriculture or holistic planning grazing. Read Jim Stanley's book and Rufus's book. Land conservation. Find out how you can promote conservation easements. Go talk to these groups and say, hey, how can I help you out? How can I further your mission and we can conserve more land? And also, frankly, one of the co-founder, Brent Evans, he created a bond that helped create Friedrich Park and help me out here. The 3 parks in Kendall County, Friedrich, Kreitzberg, and Joshua Springs. I apologize, I'm in a mode. It's a $5 million bond. He'd never done it before, and he decided it needed to be done. He found out how to do it, and he did it. All right? And if you ever met Brent Evans, he's not some great politician kind of guy. He's a great guy. He knows how to speak well, but he's not it's all polished in a suit. Let me talk to you about this. He's like, hey man, come on, this makes sense. Let's do this. And then obviously Jaime Gonzalez is coming up next. I'm sorry I didn't get all the accents right on your name. But basically get involved. And there's so many avenues for advocacy. Homeowners associations, social networks. I'm talking social networking amidst other versions. Church groups, you can post flyers around town, you can write articles, reach out to the press, and speak at city council, etc. Believe me, people are not speaking enough at city council to voice their concerns. And I'm talking about you just wander in, you just at the beginning of the meeting, just say, I'm here just to talk about this concern, and then keep showing up and keep talking about it. You want to put it on the record. Resources, I gave you a thing, just the basic, like a screenshot of the Hill Country Alliance website. Check out the Inspire Boerne, check out that master plan. I gave it to you as a handout, but those have clickable links, so you can dig deeper into these topics and learn more. We should have an Inspire Kerrville, an Inspire Fredericksburg, an Inspire Bulverde. We should have these things all over the place where citizens are acting together to create beneficial outcomes. And then finally, I like this, and I'm sorry, Craig, I just got to go finish this up. And this quote, until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth that ignores ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. The moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issue from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it, because boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. So begin it now. And when I'm talking about, when it says providence moving, yeah, you can see it as metaphysical, but also at the same time, it's just that people realize, oh, this is the guy to talk to, or this is a lady to talk to. And and she needs to go talk to this person, because I heard them talking about it as well. It can just be totally pragmatic. It's just that you are now active. You're paying attention. You're putting yourself where the information's coming, and you figure out how to work it. We found this definitely. I've definitely seen this happen time and time again recently. And again, I want you either right here at this line being active, or better still, things like low impact development, conservation development, whatever. I want you back up here in the black. In other words, I want you to be saying, come on, we can retrofit this, we can change this, we can do this better. We've got to stop this right here. And so please, please find a topic and get into it. And that wraps my story, my talk.